I didn't do that.
Okay, Nico,
Yeah,
I give up on trying to get it working on YouTube. I just don't have the patience tonight, so I'm recording it and then I'll upload it later. I'm recording locally to my computer. I'm going to make you and Michael co-host.
okay, sounds good. That's fine.
And then
Okay.
you can enable recording on your end. That would be fantastic too. Just.
Okay, I would like to also include the previous footage in
Yep.
the recording. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Please, if you don't mind, it's all good. So I've just made you both co-hosts.
So we
And
are not streaming on YouTube.
not on YouTube, I give up.
Okay.
I will upload it later, somehow.
Okay, that's nice.
No problem. That's okay.
For some reason, it's not taking the token and I give up.
So about 2 minutes here, and then I'm going to start. About a minute.
Cue the suspense
Yeah.
music.
Which soundtrack do you prefer, sir?
Something from Star Trek, maybe,
Okay.
or Star Wars. Star Wars, probably.
What do you think about the Wrath of Khan soundtrack? You a fan?
I'm a fan of anything that has to
Okay.
do with science fiction.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Hey, ask me about science fiction
I will.
sometime,
I
because
will.
I'll tell you a cute story from my childhood.
Okay, Ennio, it's 6 o'clock. Ennio's going to introduce me, and then I'll introduce you. So Ennio, I'll let you take the lead.
Yep, just give me 5 more seconds. Okie doke.
Ennio, you should have your picture. Where's your picture?
Oh, no,
Your
you need to
video.
see this face. No, I
Oh.
want to see this face, but I'll do it just for now.
There you are. Hi, see
yeah.
that?
Not bad for
There-
me. Okay,
There you are.
kill this.
So many smart-looking people. All you people look intelligent. What the heck? You look intelligent.
It's been one of those days. I'm avoiding everything I can today.
You're doing great. You're doing great. It's complex stuff, technology, you know? You're
You're
making it
mo-
work.
You are most kind.
Imagine trying to do this in 1980. My God. Just
Huh.
getting to this point with all these faces. I mean, we're like the Brady Bunch of computers. Look at
It's
this.
true.
I love that.
Okie dokie.
That's great.
So ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our first hybrid virtual physical TPUG meeting. I'm Enyo, and our speaker tonight is Michael Tomczyk, who you guys will all know. And we will be taking questions, and pre-submitted questions will be taken by Nico. So gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you, Ennio. Mr. Tomczyk, I know we corresponded and you said, call me Michael. And I
Yes.
called you sir. Remember, I texted you and I said, I know in your book you don't like to be called sir, but that's a form of respect. And I like
You know,
to
when I
say-
was in the Army, they had to call me sir, and I just didn't like that. So I made everybody call me LT instead of
Yeah.
lieutenant or sir. I said, just call me LT. It sounded like a name. Everybody loved it.
That's great. I want to say thank you for your service to our country, first and foremost. And on behalf of TPUG and everybody present, thank you so much for joining us. I know I've been trying to get in touch with you and you've had, you know, been very busy with your home and revision of Home Computer Wars. So thank you for your time. I'm going to jump into some questions and then I'm going to open it up to everybody else. Where do I start? I'm over the moon here. Ennio told me, this was, we talked about a couple months ago, he said, can you believe this, Nico? Michael is one of our heroes. He's one of our heroes. Yes, that's what he said. You know, and again, on behalf of everybody, I'm not gonna gush because I'm very emotional. But I want to start with an excerpt from Home Computer Wars. There's a little label on it, so that's why I got my fingers there. Please get this book. It's like sipping red wine. It's a great book on history of computing, not just Commodore, but insight into Apple, Atari, etc. Please get it. As I understand, Mr. Tomczyk is writing a new edition, so we'll get to that.
Oh, cool.
Let me get to this part here. I didn't realize that I was enlisting in a war, the home computer war. I was about to become an eyewitness, historian, high-ranking combat officer, and a member of a worldwide cast of characters, including samurai warriors, political cutthroats, smiling young geniuses, nerds, hackers, wizards, robots, commandos, and millionaires. It was the opportunity of a lifetime. Wow. What can you say about that, Michael, Mr. Tomczyk?
I just couldn't believe how I got sucked into the home computer era. I mean, I was managing a little company in San Francisco, and Atari was one of our clients, and we got a video game called Star Raiders. It was the first game that had star fields in the firmware, so that when you traveled through space, the stars went past you and the spaceships went past you. And everybody got hooked, and I couldn't get my staff to stop playing that silly game. So I took it home. 3 mornings later, I looked up at this thin shaft of light coming in through the curtains in my living room, and I had been up 3 nights in a row with no sleep playing this silly game. So I quit my job, plunged into the computer era. I had been a journalist, so I started writing articles for Compute and Compute's Gazette. I went down to do articles on Apple, and I wound up becoming friends with Wozniak, and I got to know Jobs. And I was the only guy who could walk into Apple and walk back to Wozniak's cubicle, and the guards would chase me down the hall and say, "Michael, you got to get your security badge. You got to sign in." And I'd say, "You know who I am. Come on, I'm going to see Woz." And
Yeah.
so then I said, "I'm not doing this for my health. I'm doing this to get a job. I want to be in the computer era because everybody's hooked on it. If I could get hooked on it, everybody will be." So I had been taking basic programming classes. I lived on my savings for 6 months. At the end of 6 months, I had $10 in the bank, $6 in my pocket. That's all I had. But I had a job offer from Apple. I had a job offer from Atari, from Conrad Judson, the VP Consumer Products at Atari. And then I went to see Jack Tramiel. Now, at that time, I had a funny way of thinking about this. I said, Apple has too many geniuses. They're the Papa Bear. Atari had very few geniuses. They're the baby bear. And Commodore seemed to have half geniuses and half idiots. They had done so many things right and so many things wrong. So I went to see Jack Tramiel, and we talked and we hit it off, and he wound up hiring me as assistant to the president and marketing strategist. And one of the first things we talked about was doing this small home computer, the VIC-20. We didn't call it the VIC-20, but my first day on the job was in Europe at a big international meeting, and Jack wanted to do the small computer, and Chuck Peddle, who was our senior engineer and our guru, a resident guru, I actually flew on the plane to Europe with Chuck and his wife, and I got to know him really well. And he told me what to watch out for in Commodore and how to navigate. So when we got there, Chuck presented something that looked just like an Apple II. The form factor was an Apple II. If you look at the pictures from that era, you'll see pictures of Chuck with what looks like an Apple II on the table. And then Jack said he wanted this small computer because he knew that a semiconductor engineer named Bob Yanis, when he was a student intern at MOS Technology, our semiconductor company, Bob did a little computer based on something called the VIC chip. We tried to sell that to Mattel. We tried to sell it to Atari. They didn't want to buy it. So Bob made a little computer, and Jack knew that prototype existed. So he said, "That's what I want." And Chuck said, "No." And all the managers said, "No, we need this a personal computer. We need to make more money. We can't make any money on a small computer." And I said, A small computer that we sell for like $300, that's a $1,500 sale item with all the peripherals and things. It's not a small computer. So anyway, Jack listened to all the arguments and only 4 of us wanted the small computer. And I was one of them, and it was my first day with the company. So I'm fighting over this computer. If you look at pictures from that day, you'll see dark circles under my eyes because I can't sleep on a plane. So I had no sleep, and I'm sitting arguing passionately for this computer, along with Kit Spencer from the UK, Tony Tokai from Japan, and Harold Speyer from Germany. And those became my in-company friends later on. So anyway, Jack listened to all the arguments, and finally he stood up at the table and he pounded on the table, like boom. He was like a physical guy. He was like, he would swear at people. He had a deep booming voice, like he made the walls shake with his baritone voice. And he pounded on the table and he said, "Gentlemen, the Japanese are coming, so we will become the Japanese." And everybody fell silent and they had to accept his mandate.
Wow.
That's what happened.
Incredible. Now, I've got some screen glitches, but I want to continue on with this,
Go
Michael.
ahead.
I'm curious about the job offers you received from Apple and Atari. What were you looking for when you went to Commodore? In your book, you seem like you really made inward tracks with these companies. What was it about Atari and Apple that you said, I have to meet with Jack? Because then in your book, you said to Jack that I heard you're a crook.
Well, I was sitting in Wozniak's cubicle with Andy Hertzfeld and Wozniak. They sat together, they worked together next to each other. And I was sitting there and Steve Jobs came in and we were talking and I said, "Hey guys, I'm not doing this for my health. I'm not doing this to write some articles." By the way, my first article was on that video game that guy got hooked on. I did an interview with the creator of that game, the game designer, Star Raiders. And that was my first article. So I said, "Look, I'm looking for a job." So you know what they said? Jobs said, "Look, Michael, go in the cafeteria, look at the job requisitions, find a job you're qualified for, and we'll hire you for that." So I got to choose my own job. Well, I went in the cafeteria and they had these really bureaucratic looking job forms and they just looked so sterile. And I went, not my thing. I'm not normally in my life up to that time, I would walk in, impress somebody, and they would say, "You're hired. We'll figure out your job title and compensation later." That's what I was used to. So this very formal job thing, and I said, Apple had so many geniuses. They were all so freaking smart. I would be lost in the shuffle no matter how good I was. So I went to Atari and Conrad Judson told me what his vision of the home computer was. And he said it was like a stereo that would be on a shelf, like a hi-fi.
That's
and
awesome.
I went, "Yeah, you don't quite get it. It's not quite that. It's much more involving and engaging than that.
Yeah.
It's a lifestyle." And they didn't get that. And I got it.
Oh.
So then, and I was ambidextrous by this time because I had been taking classes in basic programming and software at night. And guess what? Some nights they didn't have enough Apples or they didn't have enough Commodores. So one night I was on a Commodore and the next night I was on an Apple and I became ambidextrous. Is that cool or what? So I knew the best features of both. And I loved
your strength.
Huh?
That was your strength. That's what you could give to Jack Trammell, is the insider's look into other companies, not just insider into Commodore.
Well, not only that, but I had come to San Francisco and Silicon Valley from Los Angeles, where I had got my MBA at UCLA. And while I was getting my MBA, I worked as a consultant in Beverly Hills, mostly doing product launch and product management. So I was a product management specialist already. I knew what it took to design and launch a product. So I just applied that thinking here. That's why when he said you can be assistant to the president, I said, I want to be marketing strategist too. Can you add that title? Because I'm gonna provide a lot of ideas. And he said, sure. Now, what happened was, when you're a journalist, you can get an interview with anybody. You can just call them on the phone and they'll just accept it. I don't know why that is, but journalists have that knack. So I just got an interview with Jack. I had a job offer in my pocket from Apple and Atari, but I heard so many great things about Commodore and I love the computer. So I went to see Jack and I walked in and the first thing he said to me was, so what do you know about Commodore? And I said, well, I don't know much about this. I know exactly the words. I said, I don't know much about Commodore, but everybody who knows you seems to think you're some kind of a crook.
Huh.
And I figure if you're not in prison, you're not a crook, you're just a shrewd businessman. And I said, I'd like to learn to be shrewd like that. My
Wow.
exact words. Now, you know why I can repeat that?
Yeah.
I practiced those words 45 minutes in front of a mirror until I could say them smoothly.
Incredible.
I did that on purpose. And Jack leaned back, his expression didn't change one iota. He just looked at me and then he said, what else? It didn't even faze him that I called him a crook. And I thought, now that's the guy I want to work for. And I said, I know 20 things wrong with your company that I can help fix. You have 1940s packaging. You have horrible relations with your user groups. Your advertising sucks. Your technology is great, but nobody knows it. And your user manuals look like they were written by medieval monks. And I went on and on like that. And I said, I can help you with all that. So he said, let me think about it. The next day I called 11 times and I got put off. And then finally 7 o'clock at night, everybody's gone from the company. Jack hears the phone ringing on his secretary's desk. He's walking by, he picks up the phone. It's me. And I said, Jack, he said, Michael, come on in tomorrow. I figured out what I'm going to do with you. And just before I made that phone call, I said to myself, if he doesn't answer the phone and give me the job on this call, I'm going to Apple tomorrow and he can come and beg on bended knee and I won't join. And that call just made the difference.
I love the idea that you put in the book, or the fact that Jack would pick up the phone and know all the people had gone home and he was wandering the halls and he would pick up phones and talk to people. As you said, he wanted his hands on different parts of the company.
Jack is very Jewish. He would go like this. He would go, Michael, you have to touch and feel everything. You have to be involved, you know? So he would be walking down the hall in the accounting department and the phone would ring. He would stop and pick it up and handle an accounting call. He did that all the time. He was one of those, talk about hands-on management. He just wanted to touch and feel everything.
What was the computer that you asked him for when you received the job offer and he said no and he was teasing you? What was that?
No, I asked him for a Commodore business computer system because I knew I would be doing a lot of word processing and writing. And first he said no, and then he said, of course, you know.
Well, which model did you have in your office when you got that, you know, became his assistant?
What do you mean, before or after I was there? I mean, I had an Atari at home.
In your book, you say you got the position and you asked him for a computer and he said no.
I think I got what the equivalent of a CBM prototype.
Oh, okay.
Commodore business machine. Yeah, I wanted the highest end model. I knew it existed by that time. I'm really good at finding out inside a company, outside a company, in an industry. I am like a detective. I can just sleuth out information that most people can't get. Like when we did the VIC-20 and I wanted to do programmable function keys, I got Tony Tokai to take me to a place where the NEC and some other companies routinely showed prototypes to do market research from customers. And I saw a PC-5000, and the PC-5000 had programmable function keys, and that's where I got the idea for that. And that's just from sleuthing around, and that's the way I work. Anyway, when I came back from England, I wrote a 30-page single-spaced memo, and when I was done, I didn't know what to put on the cover, and you can tell I'm not a serious guy, so I drew a happy face with a beard and mustache, and I put that on the cover, and I threw that on Jack's desk, and Jack looked at it and said, "What's this?" And I said, "That's everything should be done with a new computer. Make sure whoever's in charge does this." And Jack said, "Okay." A week later, after showing it all around the company, he came back and threw it back on my desk, and we had the reverse conversation. I said, "What's that?" And he said, "That's everything should be done with a new computer. You're in charge of making it happen." And I went, what? He said, well, you're in charge. I told everybody in the company who's involved with this that nothing gets done without you approving it. And he said, this is not going to be easy because nobody works for you and most of them are older than you. You're going to have to do it by persuasion and a little bit my authority. And I said, okay, I can do that. I just accepted that. I had been in the Army. I'd been a captain in the Army. I was used to, I didn't in the Army, I was not the robot. In the Army, I always worked for generals because I'm a rule breaker and I'm very informal. Whenever I came to a new assignment in the Army, I was at Fort Bragg as information officer for a year. I was in Vietnam. I was in Korea. I always went to the headquarters and said, I should be working here in the headquarters. And they went, why? And I would tell them, because I'm really good and I'm a problem solver and I belong here. And you know what? Every time they said, oh, okay, fine. And I always worked in headquarters because I broke all the rules. You can break all kinds of rules in the military and get far ahead. I was a captain in 2.5 years at a time when it took 4 years minimum. And I was a captain in 2.5 years. And the reason is because everybody else would walk into the general's office and snap to attention and say, General, what can I do for you? What do you need? Da, 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 da. And I just walk in and say, hey, General, what's going on? You got any problems I can help you with? And then they love that. They just love that. And that's the way, that's my style. So anyway, I became the de facto product manager for the new computer. And a few months later, after we gave it its name, VIC-20, we called it VIC-20 because VIC after the video interface chip, and then 20. And Jack, one day he said, why are you calling it the VIC-20? 20 doesn't have anything to do with anything. And I said, yes, it does. It's a friendly number. And he said, huh? And I said, friendly number, 5, 10, 20, 100, friendly numbers. You have to have a friendly number. And he said, why does it have to have a number? And I said, because Vic by itself sounds like a truck driver and I can't market that. So we're going to call it VIC-20. And he looked at me and he said, oh, okay. Then he said, how come you're doing $299.95 as the price, $299.95? And I said, well, we all agreed about $300 is the good price because those comparable computers were selling for about $600 at the time. And we could make a profit at $300 because we were vertically integrated. We made our own semiconductors at MOS Technology, so we could make a profit on the CPU, which most companies couldn't. So we had a big advantage by being vertically integrated. So the bottom line is, later on, I asked Jack, can I be the VIC-20 product manager? Because I had been a product manager before in my career. And he said, no, I don't believe in product managers. I said, so what can I be? Well, at that time, there was a gas shortage. Does that sound familiar? And the president had created an energy czar, which was very odd at the time. And Jack looked at me and he said, you can be the Vic czar. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And I said, can I put that on my business card? And he said, sure. So I have a business card that says Michael Tomczyk, Vic czar. It was hilarious. Now, about 3-4 months later, he relented and he allowed me to be the product manager because I was obviously doing the job. But I was for about 3 months, the Vic czar. Is that hilarious or what?
That is hilarious. Well, thank you for the VIC-20. On behalf of everybody, this is my first computer, sir. I received it as a birthday gift in 1981. And it was the best gift ever. I had a data set and was able to learn programming on it. I'm taking it from a user standpoint, but from your perspective, what was it about the VIC that was going to not only outshine the competition, but outshine the Commodore Max and any of the other models that were coming up?
Well, having worked with both personal computers, I knew what I wanted in this computer, and all my friends and colleagues who were close to me, who were knowledgeable about this, and we were all self-taught. Everyone at the time was self-taught. There were no classes on this. We all knew what we wanted. First of all, I wanted full-size typewriter style keys because that's what we had on the PET and the CBM. So why not on the VIC? Jack and a lot of engineers wanted a membrane style keyboard, and boy, I fought like hell.
Oh, good for
That
you.
didn't happen. I just fought and kept that off. I said, no way. Also, I did my research. I found out that we could affordably and profitably make a full-size keyboard that would not hurt us. So I could make that argument to Jack. It wasn't just that I wanted that feature. Then when I went to Japan, you know, some of the US engineers did not want to work on this. It was an uphill battle. It was a real fight. Our US engineers didn't want to do it. Chuck Peddle left the company over this along with some engineers. Some of the engineers refused to work on it. We had to get some of the work done in Japan. So I spent a lot of my time in Japan with Yash Terakura, the Japanese engineer who did a lot of the work on this. And we launched it first in Japan. I worked with Tony Tokai, the general manager, very supportive. He was like my partner in this. He doesn't get enough credit for his contribution, but I had lots of allies. And so I knew that we needed color, full color. We needed a typewriter style keyboard. We needed an RS-232 interface so we could do telecommunications. I already knew that we needed that so that users could talk to each other. We didn't have internet, we didn't have social media, but we had Dow Jones, The Source, and CompuServe, which were kind of early versions of telephone-based chat networks. And after we did the VIC-20, I contracted with outside engineers to do a modem that for $100 that we could sell for $100 because modems were selling for $600, acoustic cradle, handset cradle modems, about $600. So I said, why can't we do a $100 modem? And then everybody who's in the user group, like Toronto user groups, you could talk to each other and answer each other's questions and take the pressure off our customer service. I had hired 7 students from Drexel University to be our customer service department. They couldn't handle all the phone calls. So I said, let's do a modem and let the users answer each other's questions on CompuServe and the Source. And then I went to the Source and CompuServe and I got them to give us $200 worth of free subscriptions and user time. So you could buy a modem for $100 and get, so the VIC-20 became the first microcomputer or the first computer of any kind to sell 1 million units. And the VIC-modem became the first modem of any kind to sell 1 million units. And those are my sort of claims to fame. Now, let me say one more thing. You used the word hero and stuff. Yes, I did fight for all this. I was an uphill battle. I broke a lot of rules to help make this happen. I had to really manage horizontally in many cases. And it was kind of an uphill battle to get it launched. And it did jumpstart the home computer revolution. But I have to say, ever since the 1980s, once a month, I get 1 or 2 people who track me down and send me an email or a Facebook note saying, thanks for doing the VIC-20 and fighting for that. It changed my life. It was my first computer. It got me in IT. It got me skills I used in my career. It changed my life. And every time I get one of those messages, I don't feel like I achieved something. I don't feel any special sense of pride. I just feel humbled, very humbled, because when I was growing up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, I mean, backwater city in the Midwest, like fishing on the bank of a river like Tom Sawyer, I used to pray to God, please just let me do something significant with my life. I mean, I'm growing up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. I want to do something significant. And I think God answered my prayer. And that's a very humbling thing when you wind up in the field of innovation, which I'm still doing. I'm still allowed to do innovation. And I'm still doing it, which is amazing. And I think innovation keeps you young. I mean, I certainly don't look or act my age. Everybody says that. And I think it's innovation that sort of keeps you young. So you guys want to be young and stay energetic and healthy, just get into innovation, do more innovation.
Innovation. Michael, I wanted to know, in terms of different operating systems and things that you had seen with Apple and Atari, how was that influencing your vision with VIC-20 since you're the VIC czar? And my second question is, were you ever headhunted while at Commodore from other companies trying to get you on board once you had been accepted as Jack's assistant, his right hand?
I knew Bill Gates very well. I used to talk to him all the time at conventions because Bill had licensed Commodore Basic to Jack. I think we didn't have to pay a royalty on it as long as we didn't change it. So that's why we got that from Bill Gates. And we were very friendly and chummy. We didn't socialize, but we talked all the time at conventions. Our booths were usually close to each other. Steve Jobs never talked to me again after that. I walked up to Steve to say hi at the first convention that we were at together. He turned his back on me and refused to even acknowledge my presence. He was so angry
unfortunate
that I did not go to Apple. Nobody ever headhunted me for one simple reason. I was so identified with Commodore. Jack said, "You're the only person beside myself who I authorized to give interviews to the press because you're a former journalist. You understand the religion." He called his business philosophy the religion. And he said, when I first joined him, he said, your job isn't going to be to assist me. Your job is religion, then a full job. And that's the way he saw my role. So I had permission to sit in on all his phone calls, walk in unannounced and sit down in any meeting he was in and ask him any question whatsoever. I asked him once, how do you deal with the Holocaust? And he looked at me and he said, "I live in the future." And that became my personal mantra, but I have a different take on it. He lived in the future to forget the Holocaust and move forward. I say I live in the future because I want to make the future happen faster. And I've seen that we can do it. So after I left Commodore, I actually, I helped promote and helped launch as a consultant gene therapy, nanotechnology. I wrote a book called Nano Innovation, which because there was no books on innovation and nanotechnology. So I wrote one. It's like a Bible on nanotechnology. And now I'm doing fintech and blockchain/crypto innovation. We just filed 2 patents in blockchain last week. So I'm still innovating. And that's my whole life has been breaking rules.
Yes.
And I asked Jack once also, you don't seem to hold any animosity toward the Germans, because we were doing business in Germany and Jack felt very comfortable there. I was in a meeting with Jack and the German government where we asked them to give us a free factory. And they said, "Why should we give you a free factory?" And the factory was going bankrupt, by the way. And Jack said, "Because you owe it to me. I'm a Holocaust survivor."
Wow.
And he said, "Also, be great PR for you." And the government officials looked at each other and they said, "Great. By the way, on that trip, we flew in on our private jet. They took our passports and our passports were never stamped. There's no record that we were ever there for that meeting." Is that cool or what?
Oh, that's cool. It's totally off the books.
I know. It's so cool. Anyway, so.
I know. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's it. So I asked Jack, do you hold any animosity toward the Germans? He said, "No, the German people did not kill the Jews." And he said something very poignant that I never forgot. He said, "The rules killed the Jews." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Germans follow rules. That's in their culture. And if maniacs are making the rules, the Holocaust happens." And that's what happened. And he said it was the rules killed the Jews. And that's what he felt. That's a very interesting take. By the way,
incredible. This is really incredible.
Jack thought he was past that. And then one time he came back from Germany, he was in Berlin, and he came back. By the way, one day we were driving on the Autobahn. We were in Germany together. I went all over with Jack as assistant to the president. That was my role. I was like Radar O'Reilly to his colonel. I literally had a clipboard that I took notes on, and I followed him around like Radar O'Reilly. It was so funny. And so we were on the Autobahn once, and Jack was driving. He loved to drive. He drove taxi in New York before he went into typewriters and computers and calculators and so forth. And Jack looked at me and he said, you know, I helped build this road. And he smiled. And I said, excuse me? He said, this is the Autobahn. I helped build this. He said, we did a good job, didn't we? And what he was talking about was slave labor building the Autobahn. Shoot, that was so creepy. And then another time he said he was sleeping in his hotel room and he thought he was past all of that. And he heard somebody in the alley downstairs yelling, Scheißkopf, 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 which you can translate that if you want. And he woke up in a cold sweat because that's what the Nazi guards would yell in the prison camp. And he realized that he wasn't quite
So
past
for
it.
as much as Jack into the past, incredible.
He wanted to create wealth for his family. He didn't just want to innovate. Okay, he started off in typewriters and then he did mechanical, electronic, and he got a sense from having a typewriter repair shop and coming up through the consumer electronics and the innovation path of consumer electronics, which allowed him to do Commodore and make this what I call culture of innovation, very tough, very rigorous, very cool, very unique. And so he learned that and that was part of it. But underlying all of this, he had 3 sons. And he wanted to make sure that they would be taken care of financially. So if anything happened like the Holocaust in the future, they would have enough money to get out. Because he said to me, when he was in Poland and Germany, the rich immigrants were able to escape. Not all of them. Many of them clung to their houses and their businesses until it was too late. But many of the wealthy people were able to get out. And he knew that if you have some wealth in your family, you can survive almost anything. And that was an underlying motivation, which he never talked about very much.
And maybe this home computer war was a way for Jack to cope with the trauma of the Holocaust.
He didn't think about it. He really
No?
did put it. No, he really did put it past him. In fact, he was shocked when the person was yelling in the alley, and he woke up with a memory of that, because he really did put it behind him. He really did live in the future, and I embrace that. By the way, this is a good time for me to say, many years ago, I coined a term, Commodorean. Jack created a philosophy, a mantra, an innovation culture, a business style he called the religion. He called his business philosophy the religion. And he told me, Michael, you have to learn the religion. And then there was a group of people inside the company who didn't all have high titles, but we were called a family. It was an infrastructure of people that he thought got the religion. And we were able to do anything we wanted. We had like carte blanche, total autonomy. I knew guys who fired vice presidents who were higher ranking than them, and they fired him anyway, and then called Jack and told him, and Jack said, fine, because the family outranked everybody. And the family got a whole bunch of perks, stock options, 100% salary bonus at the end of the year. The family got special things. There were about 25 of us, engineers, software engineers, executives, marketeers, all different kind of people. Jack knew who they were. Jack knew who got the religion. Jack knew who the faithful were. So when I was a Commodore and afterwards, I coined a term, Commodorean. Commodorian meant at the time anyone who worked for Commodore or was associated with Commodore, who got the religion, who understood what we were trying to accomplish. and were part of our culture. After I left Commodore, Commodorian came to embrace people who owned Commodore computers and understood it from that viewpoint, like most of you. And now today, and then over the years, Commodorian changed its meaning to include retro computing enthusiasts, collectors, people like you who keep the computers alive, who write new programs for it, who appreciate the technology, who talk about it, who keep the history alive. And I will expand that meaning to include anyone who embraces the Commodore philosophy, which is a unique innovation style, which still applies today. The reason why I'm here today and why I keep speaking and presenting myself and making me available is because I want to make one very clear point. All the things we did at Commodore, some of which were pioneering in terms of innovation culture and style, skunk works, fighting against gray-haired old men who wanted to hold us back, which I did a lot of that. Breaking rules to make things happen. You can't be a disruptive innovator without breaking rules. All those things we did then hold examples, lessons, and insights for anybody doing innovation today. If you're doing radical innovation is an idea, a discovery, or an invention that causes people to change the behavior. Disruptive innovations are innovations that either create a new industry or transform or destroy an existing industry. That's a disruptive innovation. Those things are what make civilization evolve. So even people who are early adopters of new technologies, like look at us here, we're like the Brady Bunch. We're like the Commodore Brady Bunch. Imagine this in 1980, we couldn't have this. Amazing. I see all your faces. My God, this is so cool. This is like, for me, this is like ultra cool. This is like
This is
Brady
really
Bunch.
cool. And before I turn to the attendees for questions, I'd like to ask you just a few more questions.
Go ahead.
Number one, what do you think about all of this kind of retro mini Commodore, mini Amiga, this obsession with people to recreate things that are now miniaturized? I mean, what are you thinking as you see this scroll across your feeds and people obsessing over this? Like, we can't accept that Commodore has closed its doors. You know, I'm reading Home Computer Wars, and I get a sense of, you know, the day you walk to your meeting with Jack and you explain the lawn, how it's cut, and I just want to go back to that building. And I just want to recreate it. Why can't I move on? Am I denying reality?
When I was thinking about this event, I had mixed emotions because I am very gratified that the retro computing and collecting community keeps alive the Commodore spirit, embraces the technology, preserves history. And I've done my role in pulling out all my records and things and trying to preserve history on the Commodore Historical Society website. Dave McMurtry is doing a wonderful job preserving the history because history contains lessons, you know. So part of me says, geez, all these people are doing retro stuff, but me, I personally am still living in the future. I'm doing fintech and blockchain crypto. Do you know blockchain has a scaling problem? If you increase the number of transactions in blockchain record keeping, it slows down and it costs more energy and it costs more money and it's less efficient and it can never be infinitely scalable. Well, we filed patents last week that solves that problem, addresses that problem and some other things as well. I'm still innovating and doing things to reshape the future. So I took Jack at his word. I embraced his philosophy. I'm still living in the future. Something became part of my nature. I believe if you are a world-class innovator, I'm very fortunate to become that, you have an obligation to keep innovating till you take your last breath. That's why I'm not retired. Because innovation, radical innovation, disruptive innovation is what helps civilization evolve. Doesn't help people evolve, although there's some people argue that. But we're probably evolving as humans just to multitask, to look at a screen like this, to do ubiquitous communication. Our brains are probably adapting to that. We don't even realize it, but at some point that's probably happening already. But civilization evolves from innovation. So anyone who's good at it has an obligation to keep doing it. That's why I'm still in this game.
Is it true that you taught William Shatner his first computer?
I didn't teach him his first computer, but I actually showed him his first computer. He became our spokesperson. We had a wonderful ad agency that made him our spokesperson. I'm not responsible for that, but I was at the first advertising photo shoot, and I was coordinating the technology, and my technicians, the VIC commando. I should pay homage to the young guys and gals that I recruited from 18 to 26 years old. They were the product management team. I called them the VIC commandos because they weren't tough enough to fight against the executives that were abusing them. So I told them we're going to call ourselves the VIC commandos, and we're going to be like a military team, and we got to get tough. And we did. I stood in the aisle one day. We had like an open bay, and in a loud voice, I said, look, the next person that comes and steals one of our computers for a convention or any other use is going to get fired, and I'm going to fire them. And I don't care what their rank is. And everybody was so scared, they never took another one of our computers. That's what I call the VIC commandos. So, and they were great. They were all self-taught. Andy Finkel, Neil Harris, Eric Cotton, Bill Hindorf, John Stockman, the late Sue Mitnock was my secretary at first. And these and other VIC commandos, Andy Finkel especially, and Neil. Neil was like assistant product manager. Those guys and gals, they did a lot of the grunt work, so I want to pay homage to them. But I just think that it's fine to keep the past alive, but I think everybody should also be looking at technology and how it can relate today and what we can learn from it. I think we have to think about that too. We have to think about how does all this tie into what we're doing today in terms of innovation, not just.
What were you doing at CES? Instead of just marketing, and obviously everything was polished and ready to go, what are your memories of CES? Were you doing any detective work?
Well, I'll tell you something else. One more thing, answer your Shatner question.
Sure.
That me and the VIC-20, by the way, the VIC-20 was not turned on because if we plugged it into the TV, you could see the scan lines in the TV ad. So we had to do a separate feed to the monitor. So the pictures of me and Shatner do not show, the computer's not plugged in. And everybody comments on that, and that's the reason. But that was the first time Shatner actually touched a real computer, because all the computers on Star Trek were fake. Now, 3 years ago, I realized I had those pictures of Shatner and I didn't have any autographs. And so I contacted him through his assistant and I said, hey, would you mind autographing one of these pictures for me? And his assistant said, send a couple. So I sent a bunch of photos to him and he signed 3 of them. And when they came back, I called his assistant and I said, why did Bill sign 3 of them? And she said, well, first of all, he remembers you very fondly and he wants to congratulate you on your success, which was very generous of Shatner. And then she said, you can keep one of them and sell 2 of them. Can you imagine? That's how Bill Shatner thinks. He's so freaking fan friendly. And after 30 years, he was still thinking like
that. I regret 2 years ago, you contacted me and offered me an autograph. I regret not taking up on that offer.
Duh.
So
I
still
still have one autograph that I will offer for sale at some point, but I'm moving my house right now. I'm selling my house this week, moving after I move At some point, I will put my second autographed Shatner photo with my signature and his for sale, just because why should I keep it around? Somebody else should have it.
Michael, I'd like to open up the questions to everybody now. And I see that there's a number of questions in the text box. People are really excited. The first VIC was released as the 1001. Was there any significance to that number?
Yeah, we introduced it first in Japan because the Japanese version was ready first because Yashi Terakura was working on that. So we introduced it in September 1980 at Seibu department store, which was where a lot of new technology was introduced. It was at a department store. And I was there for that. It was funny because the engineers from all the competing companies, NEC, Samsung, all the other companies, the engineers showed up at our booth with screwdrivers. And they were they kept unscrewing the case, trying to look inside to see how the hell could we do a $300 color computer? They just wanted to see the circuit board. So that was one thing. And then at first I wanted to call the computer the Commodore Spirit to play off the Commodore PET, because the PET was fairly well known. So why not the Commodore Spirit? And then we were going to go with Commodore Spirit. And then one day, Tony Tokai called me up and he said, Michael-san, you can't call it Commodore Spirit. And I said, why? And he said, well, in America, Commodore Spirit means Casper the Friendly Ghost. But in Japan, it means horrible soul-eating ghoul from hell. And he said, there's no like friendly spirit in Japan. So you can't call it that. So then he decided to call it the VIC-1001 because 2001: A Space Odyssey was very popular then. And he thought it would be cool to play off 2001. That's where 1001 came from.
That's awesome. Stefan asks, where is the golden silver VIC-20 for 1 millionth VIC-20 sold?
I have no idea. I never even saw it. I don't even think I knew. I didn't even know one existed.
I'll open up the question. So
I've got a question. I've got a question. Why didn't you call it the VIC-5 or VIC-10 instead of the VIC-20?
VIC-5 was too pejorative. VIC-10 was too common. VIC-20 was like a $20 bill, which everybody loves, values a $20 bill. And I just picked 20 out of the air.
VIC-100?
That was my second choice. Also, it did have 22 columns across the screen, so that was a subconscious thing, I think. Yeah, I couldn't call it the VIC-22. Yeah, 22 caliber VIC. Oh, by the way, you asked me about the CES show. Funny story.
Yeah.
Jack said, I was the only person in the company authorized to give interviews to magazines because he said, you know the religion, you're a journalist, you know what to say. I trust you. You can give any interviews you want. Help us with PR. So for the first 3 months, my face was in all the computer magazines. You can go back to the 1980s and see all kind of articles with me giving interviews. I look like Charles Manson with that beard and long hair. So I went to my first computer convention in San Francisco after being in a lot of magazines. I walked in the door, somebody yelled, there's Mike Tomczyk, and 100 people swarmed me. And I had to stand there for an hour and a half answering questions from 100 people in this convention. When I was done, I put on my dark glasses, I took off my name badge, and I spent the rest of the convention walking around incognito. True story.
Wow. I am just blown away by the opportunity to get to meet you. And I know you probably have people that just gush over you all the time when you come in and you meet them.
Let me say this. I have a funny philosophy. I learned quite early to draw a circle around my life. If you're outside the circle, you're outside the circle. I'll deal with you, but you're outside the circle. if you're inside the circle, you can have anything I have to give: time, energy, help, advice. That's what I try to do. And so you're inside the circle. All of you who are looking in tonight are inside the circle of my life now, and you're kind of trapped there forever. Now, if you step outside the circle, if you decide you don't like me, if there's something that turns you off about something I said, great, go step outside the circle. More power to you. God bless you. I run my business life exactly the same way, and it's been very successful for me. And that's the way I work. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm happy to make new friends. I don't mind making hundreds of new friends. That's just great. I love having a big network because I can spread my gospel. My religion is radical innovation, change the world, do something to improve people's lives. We want to use, like right now, our two companies, we took one public last October. We raised $100 million. We can't touch the money till next year. So it's not like we're rich, but we are using financial technology to hopefully improve people's lives. And we're also doing the same thing with blockchain. So we are doing things specifically to improve people's lives.
That's awesome. So when I was young, I didn't get to have a Commodore. We did not have a lot of money. I wanted one so bad. So bad. I used to go up to the mall. We had a store here called Software, etc. And I used to go up to the mall and play with the computers up there because they'd let you do it. There wasn't a lot they'd let you do, but you could do it. And I wanted until I was probably about 16 or 17. But my first computer was actually the Apple IIc. Because, well, it was cheap for us to get used at a deal at a time. So that was my first computer.
By the way, after Commodore, I use mostly a Mac.
I was going to actually ask that question next.
I love the Mac. The Mac was a great machine.
So back when Commodore was in its heyday, and it seemed like both Apple and IBM were both kind of leaning towards communications, integrating more communications, networking, modems, and things like that. Why didn't Commodore kind of follow that process? And I get that you guys had the concept of being different and wanting to have your own road, but it seemed to me like Commodore is also something that invites people to work together to build and develop. Like, it was clearly like a development machine. And communication might have made a difference, I guess, because for me,
What do you?
as somebody
I
who
mean,
loves Commodore,
okay.
I
first-
always have that thing in the back of my head, like, what could have made the difference? What might have made it stay? What might have made them beat out IBM? What might have made them beat out Apple? And networking and communication is kind of one thing that always sticks out to me.
Well, yeah, but I did the modem, which sold 1 million units, and it got people connected. It was an early version of the internet. We were very prescient on that. And I also helped develop the idea and push for the built-in software, which could be upgraded with a dongle, with a plug-in dongle. And so the Commodore Plus 4 was an idea that I helped promote early on. It never came to fruition. It had the top 4 killer apps. But what killed Commodore was Jack Tramiel, the founder and the chairman, had a fight, and there were a bunch of gray-haired old men from the fashion industry, believe it or not, Max Factor and Yvonne Picone and Tyson Bornemisa in Europe. Those gray-haired old dudes came in. They were friends of Irving Gould, and they got his ear, and they said, Jack is a wildcat manager. He runs $1 billion company. By the way, we hit $1 billion in sales on a calendar year before Apple did. And these guys started whispering in Irving's ear, and they said, it's time to change Jack. He's too spontaneous and impulsive to run $1 billion company. We need professional management. And we should become more like IBM, because that's all these gray-haired old guys knew was IBM. They grew up with IBM. They had no idea what Apple and Atari and home computers were. They had no idea. No, they were clueless. So basically they bought the Amiga outside. They didn't do it. They didn't engineer it inside. We stopped engineering anything inside. Nothing was engineered inside. Anything that was being done inside was killed by these guys. And I say the Commodore was killed by a bunch of gray-haired old men who didn't know what they were doing. And as soon as Jack left in January of '84, about 50 of us left in 1 week in May of '84.
Wow.
We all set our time clock. We all like put on our calendar. If nothing changes in the next 5 months, we're leaving. And in 1 week, we all left, like 50 of us, engineers, marketeers, managers, the president of the US company, Greg Pratt, everybody left. And you know what? Irving Gould and the gray-haired old men never asked us to stay. They never even said, hey, why don't you stick around? None of them asked us to stay. So we just left and they let us, and the company went into a death spiral. In 1994, I heard that Commodore was headed for bankruptcy. So I went to see Irving Gould in New York. I said, you know, I can help you rescue the company. If you make me chief operating officer, I can help. I know how to build companies and I know how to solve problems and I can rescue Commodore. And you know what he said? He kept me waiting for 2 hours in the waiting room.
Ridiculous.
Then he brought some people up from Valley Forge and they showed me a 64K game machine. It was horrible. And I said, this is a dead company. And I said, okay, sorry. And he never even considered me for a hire. He still thought of me as a product manager. And I just said, thank you very much and left. And then I accepted a job at the Wharton School where I was invited to become managing director of the Emerging Technologies Management Research Program. We studied best practices for innovation. And then as managing director, working with our faculty, I grew that into a $10 million research center, the Max Center for Technological Innovation. And then that became a $50 million research institute, the MAC Institute for Innovation Management. And then I retired after 18 years. Then I went to Villanova for 3 years. I was innovator in residence for 3 years. And I gave an annual conference. I did an annual futurist conference on all the technologies on the near horizon that everybody needs to know about because they're going to threaten to disrupt everything. So I did that every year. It was our most popular conference. And so now I'm retired. And 2 years ago, I'm walking the dog. And I see these two guys standing in a driveway and I stop and talk to them. And one of them says, I'm Dr. Saiful Kandakar and I'm from Bangladesh. I'm starting a company in fintech and I've been working on it for about 5 years. So I gave him some generic advice on the street. We wound up meeting in the office. The next thing I know, we're working on a company together. I asked him one day, how would you describe our relationship? He says, we're business brothers. And we are. We become like business brothers. All our partners are like business family members. It's so much fun. We do Zoom meetings. We work from our home office. We do WhatsApp. We do a lot of digital signatures. We do so much stuff that uses technology. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, you will see an essay I wrote called Welcome to the Neo World. This is the new style of management and business. You don't have to be in the office 9 to 5 every day. Regardless of what Facebook says, or Google says, you don't have to wait a week for a lawyer to give you a paragraph in a legal document. You tell the lawyer you want it done in the meeting now, circulate it around, and after the meeting, we'll push a document around for everybody to sign electronically, and then it'll be done. That's the way we work. And I love this style of management because it actually gives me free time. I'm technically working full time, but I'm also technically retired at the same time. And that's possible in the Neo world.
I see that you have a love for life, Michael. You're fishing and your love for food. Ramiro has a question. His mic's not working. He said, hi, Michael. This is Ramiro.
Hi, Ramiro.
Nice to see you again. I was wondering, how well did you know Bill Hurd and David Pleasance when you were at Commodore?
not that well. I knew everybody. I mean, I knew Clive Sinclair very well. I knew Adam Osborne and his girlfriend. I used to see them a lot at conventions, and we would like socialize here and there at conventions. They were really, really, really wonderful geniuses. They were what we call fast followers. They came in a little bit late, but they were just as genius level as Wozniak and Jobs. I love Clive Sinclair and I loved Adam Osborne. I thought they were just geniuses. They were just so, and nicest people in the world, just so nice.
Can you ask Michael, this is from Dave, can you ask Michael about Bill Wade?
Bill Wade and I had totally opposite business philosophies. Bill Wade was an old style manager, very efficient. He was a task guy. He wanted all his ducks in a row. He hated my loosey-goosey, spontaneous, rule-breaking maverick style. He just hated my style. He didn't hate me personally. He just hated my style. I hated his style. Although I recognize that when you're calculating how many Kmart stores you should be in and how many products each should get, and you negotiate that deal, there's a place for that. So I respected his capabilities. But boy, we had some knockdown, drag out fights. But the cool thing with Bill Wade, we could have literally a shouting match. And then he would say, you can't do things this way. And I'd say, yes, I can. It's working. And what do you think? We got $1 billion product from my style. And he said, but you can't do it. That's not the way things should be done. And we would fight like crazy. He would go to the door of my office, turn around after a fight like that, and smile at me and say, hey, Michael, could we talk about this other thing now? And we would just continue. It's just pleasant, as nice as it could be. He was a straight shooter. Man, it was great working with him. We disagreed on our style, and that's acceptable in business. You don't have to have the same style. You can hate somebody's style, but we respected each other so well that we could have a fight and then just calm down and continue on to the next subject. It was kind of bizarre, but we made it work because we were professionals, real professionals. I love Bill Wade.
I know that we've been trying to get in touch. You've been revising Home Computer Wars. Dan wants to know, and I actually want to know, when is the next revision coming?
Okay, number one, there are so many pirated copies out there. You can get it online tomorrow if you want it for free. So it's not economically feasible for me to do a revision. I think a better use of my time at my age and with my bandwidth is to finish an autobiography and then provide some updates to the book in the chapter on Commodore. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm writing an autobiography. It has 2 themes. The first theme is the 100 famous celebrities that I've encountered during my career. I have rare unpublished pictures. Remember, I started my career as a photojournalist. So I have pictures of Mick Jagger, Bob Hope, Billy Graham, George Jessel, the comedian, Jane Fonda, Donald Sutherland bought me a cup of coffee once. I have all these stories, John Ritter. I have all these stories of these famous people that I've encountered. Richard Nixon. I was in George Jessel's hotel room in Korea when he called Richard Nixon on the phone and talked to him for an hour. I sat on the bed when he was sitting in the bed talking to Richard Nixon. So I'm putting these stories in my, I met Bob Hope in Vietnam, and I have pictures of Bob Hope and Jim Nabors and Martha Ray. So I'm doing a book that has to do with celebrity, and it also touches on my minor celebrity. But then each chapter of the book deals with rule breaking. Every chapter starts with a rule I broke that led to some kind of success. By the way, watch this. If I have a hiccup, could I get maybe I should get a glass of water. Just a minute.
Yeah, as you drink, I have another
You
question.
know what that was? That was an example of the first rule I learned to break in first grade.
What?
My mother read to me when I was a baby, and I could read before I went to school. So when I got to first grade, I was bored to death. And I found that I was often forced to sit and after everybody finished their workbook, I would have to sit and wait for everybody, the last people to finish their workbook, and it was boring. So I taught myself how to hiccup. I taught myself how to hiccup so I could get out of the class. And then I would say, excuse me, Mrs. Carpenter, can I go get a glass of water? I got the hiccups. And that's my first rule. And that's when I learned that you can break the rules without hurting anybody and get a benefit. And that was in first grade in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Is that
That's
funny or
hilarious.
what?
Hilarious. You've got such a great sense of humor. Jessica has a question for you, Michael.
Yeah.
Jessica says.
By the way,
well,
I'm not going to teach anybody how to hiccup. You got to teach yourself.
Okay, well, we'll have to ask you for some tips. Jessica asks, Michael, do you feel Commodore should have waited longer before bringing out the C64?
No, I was part of that strategy with Jack. I call it the bear in the woods strategy. After we did the VIC-20, which is like a 5K computer, we had a 32K business computer, and then we had the PET. 32K was the standard. So we knew the Japanese would be coming in with a cheap 32K computer. They would come in with a computer for about $300 at 32K. We knew this because we have really good intelligence. Tony Tokai and the guys in Japan knew this. So we did what I call the bear in the woods strategy. How do you stop a bear in the woods when the bear is chasing you? I spend a lot of time in nature. I've been actually chased by a bear.
You run up a tree or use a shotgun?
No.
No?
You take off your knapsack. You throw it down in front of the bear. The bear stops to examine the knapsack, and you run like hell or climb a tree. So how do you stop the Japanese? The same way you stop a bear in the woods. You run down you're running down through the market. The Japanese are on your tail. You know they're going to bring a 32K computer. So you turn around, you throw first of all, you throw the VIC-20 at them. You know they're going to come in with a low-cost home computer. So you throw the VIC-20 at them, which is full-size keyboard, full color, RS-232 port, IEEE port, CPM, all those features, programmable function keys, and they stop and they go into a 1-year planning cycle to study what can work. By the time they're ready with a 32K computer, you turn around and you throw a 64K computer at them, and they stop dead in their tracks, and they say, oh my God, throw away all those 32K computers. And that's why the timing was what it was. It's called the bear in the woods strategy.
Wonderful. As I said, the VIC-20 was my first computer. My next door neighbor got the 64. She said, come on over and check it out. And my parents said, you already have the VIC-20. We're not getting you the 64. But I really looked at that and I drooled. I wanted that 64. What was your relationship like with Jack when he left for Atari?
Okay, let me put it this way. A few people went with Jack to Atari. After Jack had a fight with Irving and he left, some people say he resigned, some people say he quit. It's moot, doesn't matter. He left, killed the company. Jack took 6 months off and took a trip around the world with his wife. When he came back, he was offered Warner Communications, the parent company of Atari, offered him a chance to take over Atari, which he did. He didn't take over their debts. He made Warner cover their debts, but he took over the company, and I think Warner kept 30%. He made it a family business. When it was time to decide whether I would go to Atari or not, Jack invited me to New York. We had dinner at a fancy restaurant. And I remember, I think I had calves brains. And we went up to the hotel, and then we went to see an off-Broadway show together, Little Shop of Horrors. And we had a wonderful social time. And then Jack and I went back to the hotel. I think Sam was there. And Jack explained to me, Michael, Atari is not going to be a business family. Atari is going to be a blood family. I want to use Atari to bring my 3 sons together because Sam is in Asia, in Hong Kong. My other 2 sons are in like New York and other places. And so I want to bring my 3 sons together, and having a company where they have important roles will bring them together as a family. And that's one of my goals. So this is going to be a blood family company, and there's really no room for a 4th son. A business son. And that's exactly the way he explained it. And I understood completely. Now, here's the other thing. A lot of people were traumatized when Commodore went under and when Jack left. I mean, everybody hated Patton in retrospect, but boy, everybody loved working for him when World War II was on, because everybody loves working for a winner, even if he's the son of a gun, you know? So everybody, when Jack left, it was like a vacuum just sucked all the air out of the company. Many of the people at Commodore never experienced that level of success and exhilaration since. I was very lucky. I had been successful in the Army. I saw combat. I jumped out of airplanes and helicopters. I worked for generals. I won a Bronze Star. I got promoted really fast. I had an MBA from UCLA. I was a consultant in Beverly Hills for 3 years. I was very successful before I came to Commodore. So for me, achieving success was pretty easy after I left. So when Jack said, there's no role for you at Atari, I said, fine, I don't want to reinvent the wheel anyway. So I went on, I was a vice president at Cigna for a year. I was chief operating officer for a company started by some NASA scientists in Virginia for a year. And then I went to the Wharton School and I became an academic leader.
Matt asks, are you aware of any relationship that Jack had with Poland? Did he sell Atari ST in Poland in the late 80s, but are there any other stories?
I do have a story about Hungary. There was a guy who showed up at our hotel room at one convention. He had a white suit, because if you wear a white suit and white shoes, it means you're very, very wealthy, because you can afford to keep it white. And he was from Hungary. Hungary at the time was the country in the Eastern Bloc that was allowed the most freedom interfacing with the West. So this guy wanted to get like 20 or 30 Commodore computers, development systems, so they could write software. Technically, that was probably illegal at the time because we weren't allowed to give certain kind of computers to the communist countries. That was like a rule, a commerce rule. So we found a way to get 20 or 30 computers to some Hungarian software programmers who might have been temporarily based in England. I'm not sure if they were in England or in Hungary. And 6 months later, they came back with a game that they had developed, a 6502 game called Circus Circus. It was a little clown that went around keeping saucers spinning on poles. And that became the best-selling game in Europe for a number of months. That became the hottest best-selling game in Europe. And that was because we decided to give some development systems to a group of Hungarian programmers.
Jeffrey has a question. And by the way, people can unmute and ask directly. Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Hey. All right. Yeah, I do have a quick question. So can you hear me well?
Hi, Daniel.
Okay, hey, Michael. First, so the VIC-20 was my first computer. So thank you very much for that, because it set me on a fun life journey. So I have an interest in early telecomputing, specifically Commodore telecomputing, because I'm an Amiga BBS sysup. And I understand that you were the man behind the Commodore Information Network. Is that right?
Yeah, because like I said, we had 7 Drexel University students doing customer service, but they couldn't answer all the questions. So
Right.
I hired an editor to do what I call the Commodore Information Network, which actually provided answers to all the questions that all the users were asking. Because we had sold 1 million units and we needed to answer a lot of technical questions, programming questions, things like that. We also did the programmer's reference guides, which was my idea. Andy Finkel was the editor of that because it was very technical. But I knew that if we provided a technical manual that software users could have more information than any other computer provided, we could stimulate software development, which would help sell our computers. So that was a product management decision I made.
So were you involved in, because you're also, I believe, a driving force behind the VIC-modem. So were you involved in the
I
early?
actually, yeah, that was my idea. I contracted it. And I said it has to cost $33 or less so we can triple the price and sell it for $99.99.
Yes.
And
So last part to it. So were you involved in the BBS culture of the time at all?
no. Well, I had been given as a journalist some $600 direct connect modems. So I knew that they were expensive and prohibitively expensive. And I said, boy, we got to bring the cost down. I had actually been given some modems and been able to use the source and the CompuServe. So I became familiar as a user.
Okay.
And when I became a product manager, I had the authority to do something. By the way, I've told this story before, but I'll tell it here. One night I came home at midnight after gambling. By the way, I learned how to gamble without losing money, spending a week at a time in Las Vegas at computer conventions. That's a rare talent, I'll tell you that. So one night I came home to my hotel room about midnight, and the software company that I had contracted with the guys were like 3 of them were sitting on the floor in front of my hotel room door. And I said, what are you doing here? And they said, Michael, I'm sorry, we can't do the $33 modem. And I said, why? And they showed me a sketch of an acoustic modem. Remember telephones used to look like this, right? Well, the modem used to look like this. It used to look like this, and it used to have a hole here and a hole here, and you put the cradle in these little cups, and it was very expensive. So they showed me that diagram, and I said, hey, wait a minute, we have an RS-232 interface. Why can't you put it on a cartridge, like a memory cartridge or a game cartridge? Why can't we have a direct connect? Because I had been given a direct connect modem and I knew they existed. So I said, why don't you do a direct connect modem on a cartridge and we'll figure out how to put it on a circuit board. And they went, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I drew a little cartridge on a yellow notepad and they went, Eureka, we got it. And they all ran off down the hall like little meerkats. They were like meerkats scrambling down the hall. And they said, that's it, that's it. And that became the VIC-modem. So I'm actually the co-designer of the VIC-modem.
Hello, Mike. Michael, can you hear me?
Hello, how are you?
Good. Jeff
Jeffrey.
Bryce here.
Jeffrey, nice to see you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Pretty good.
Glad you could make it.
Yeah, I couldn't miss it. You're always a great speaker.
Oh,
Always
I don't know about
fantastic
that.
speaker.
I'm an honest and candid speaker. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, everyone at the VCFEs loved your talk there, and I'm glad to see here get more information about different stories and things like that.
By the way, the VCF is a wonderful, wonderful event. I enjoyed being there, and I go fishing. You know, I go fishing in Brielle all the time. That's why I ocean fish. Yeah, VCF is in the Video Museum is in Brielle, New Jersey, and my hobby is ocean fishing. In case you're wondering what I do with my spare time, guys and gals.
So let me ask you a question. You had said that the VIC-20 was the first home computer. What's the difference between a home computer and a personal computer?
At the time, the personal computer had more memory, more features, and could be used for a combination was mostly used in school for personal uses, not so much for games. It was mostly programmable. It had more memory. You could do more things with it, programming. A home computer was like as much used for games and entertainment as for programming. It was very introductory for programming. It did not allow you to do really sophisticated things. When you turned on the VIC-20, it was a 5K computer, 5K RAM. But when you turned it on, the 5K netted down to 3.6 RAM, 3.6K kilobytes, 3.6 kilobytes. Let me put this into context for you. Do you know how much 3.6 kilobytes is? 3.3 kilobytes is one page of typing paper with 40 columns across the screen, including the spaces and letters. It's one page of text. That's how much RAM memory the VIC had after you turned it on. So that's a home computer, but it played fantastic games. It had a lot of features and functions built in, great sound. You could actually use it as a little piano. I had somebody come up to a convention once and start playing music like Latin bossa nova on the VIC-20. He plugged in a little software program and he started playing it like a piano. So it was very much an entertainment and intro computer. A home computer was an intro computer. A personal computer was a serious computer for people doing homework, school, calculations, algebra, even some rudimentary business. Does that answer your question?
Yes, definitely does. And I do have a copy of your original Home Computer Wars, but it's very difficult to find. It would cost $100. I have it. I need to get you to sign it because it's funny thing is, it was actually you had signed it many years ago for somebody else. So because I bought it used, so I have to show it to you sometime. It's very interesting.
Okay, listen, I'm selling my house. I'll have a new address in mid-November to late November. And so ping me on Facebook then, and you can send it to me and I'll sign it and send it back. You can just send a self-addressed envelope.
All right, wonderful. Thank you.
Now I'm going to get 4,000 books. But anyway, I know Jeffrey from way back. Yeah, Jeffrey's a friend. Jeffrey's in the circle. Remember I said I draw a circle and whoever's in the circle, Jeffrey's in the circle.
Romero wants to ask, what would have been your next project at Commodore if you stayed?
I actually had my next project. Sig Hartman was put in charge. He became president of the software division. When Sig was offered the job by Jack, he called me on the phone and he said, Michael, Jack offered me the job of president of the software division to start a software division. And I told him I won't take the job unless Mike Tomczyk can work for me. And I said, Sig, I love you. I'd be happy to work for you. It'd be so much fun. So that's how I got working as kind of second in command at the software division. And I was building the software division, but that was so boring. It wasn't hardware. I was making design inputs and contributing to the Macs, the Ultra Macs, the Plus4 and those other computers, but I wasn't intimately involved in computer development at that time. So I just left in May of '84. But I love Sig Hartman. Sig Hartman was like a big teddy bear. He was so cool. And he had this thick Austrian accent and he was so fun, but he was one of the smartest guys I ever met. He was really shrewd. He had this persona of a panda bear, a wild panda bear. And yet his mind was like a steel trap. He was great fun to work for because he was fun and smart. I love Sig Hartman. He was actually a lovable guy. He was just lovable. He was just one of those guys, he was a character. I love Sig Hartman.
Other
Hey, Mike.
questions?
I'm a huge fan of Sig Hartman. You and I have talked a zillion times. We've talked personally on the phone a bunch of times. Historically, Bill Wade, he got credit for getting Commodore into Kmart. Like that was Bill Wade's big thing. He was, I think at the time he was the VP of sales, but recently Neil Harris said that it was actually David Harris that got Commodore into Kmart. Can you tell us anything about that?
All I know is David and Bill were both working on that. I don't think you can give either one sole credit, because I can remember Bill Wade sitting down with all kinds of sheets of paper, manually doing the inventory for each Kmart store at the beginning of the relationship. I credited Bill Wade for doing the legwork to make it happen and pushing for it, because I remember he was pushing quite early, probably before David Harris. David Harris may have closed the deal because he was a very charming Englishman. He may have been a
Hey,
high
Michael?
level guy, but I would say that I still give Bill Wade credit for actually doing the legwork.
Can you tell us about David Harris? I don't actually know
No,
anything.
I don't know much about David Harris at all.
I knew the story of Bill Wade and I've read everything about him, but I never knew anything about David Harris.
He was in the what we call in the family. He had been in Hong Kong, I think, and England, and he was a high-ranking, much respected senior executive. He was closer to Jack and Irving, and he was in that clique. He was a very high level, very intellectual, very impressive. I mean, if you met him, you just go, oh, this guy's smart. He was very cool, very elegant, charming, handsome. Yeah, David Harris. But I didn't have much interaction with David.
Did he work for Commodore UK?
I can't even tell you much about him. I just encountered him in various venues, but I didn't work with him.
Cool. Thank you, Michael.
By the way, David is, look at the Commodore Historical Society site if you want to see preservation of everything Commodore. I just sent him a couple boxes of things that he's been salting out on the website, which is a whole bunch of stuff that I just found in my files as I was packing to sell my house. So congrats to David McMurtry for all the preservation, because preserving what we did at Commodore and how it was done holds really good lessons for anybody doing innovation today, I believe.
Thank you,
Okay,
Michael.
One thing, I didn't use the VIC-modem very much, but I was very pleased. I ran a bulletin board that up in Canada, it came with a phone that said Commodore. And I had one. We used it on our bulletin board with an 8010 modem that ran on the PET. And it's funny because years later, a dog literally ate my phone. And it took 30 years, but I finally now have one of those Commodore phones back. And it's lovely. The other thing is, someone was asking about the gold VIC, the millionth VIC and all.
Yeah.
That caused kind of a scandal in TPUG, because on the front of the magazine where they had a picture of it, and this is kind of when, I think it was still the Torpet before it became TPUG magazine, and there was a split, but they misspelled millionth and called it the millionth VIC.
Good.
And did kind of lead a little bit into the Torpet going one way and TPUG magazine emerging. Anyway, as we were talking about before, I've been tinkering on my pets, but I will get to the VIC-20s.
You will. Hey, how come nobody mentioned Jim Dion's name? My goodness, Jim Dion was the general manager of Commodore Canada. And one of my first friendly acquaintances at Commodore was Jim Dion. And I went up to see him in Canada because the Canadian user group was the most knowledgeable, most supportive, best user group in the whole world, even more than the UK, honest to God. We drew a lot of encouragement, enthusiasm, support, energy from the Canadian user group. So I went up to see Jim a couple of times just to sort of, I used to visit people to get their best practices and kind of absorb their style because I didn't know what I was doing. I was in uncharted waters myself. So I would learn from other people. So I went to see Jim. First thing that happened, we went out to have a beer. He ordered a beer and the waitress brought 2 beers to each of us. And I remember thinking, why do we each have 2 beers? And Jim said, drink up. And every time I went to Canada when I was a Commodore, to see anybody in Canada, whenever we ordered a beer, they always brought 2 beers. I don't know if that was like a Canadian thing or a thing at the time, or if it still happens, but whenever I went anywhere, the waitress, we'd order a beer and the waitresses would always bring 2 beers. Is that like a Canadian thing or is it just unique to that time?
I think it was happy hour.
Really?
I think they just did that with things. There was something I was going to say about what you just said, and it's gone. Never mind. One of the reasons we didn't know a lot of the people at Commodore, and I was very involved in TPUG, is some of them didn't want to come to the meetings because I remember one guy showed up one time, and I don't know who it was, but people started getting on to him about, on some of the old pets where you could upgrade them yourself, they were drilling holes in the circuit board to make it harder. Commodore was. And people at the meeting were saying, what are you doing? Why like basically if the machine was at a reasonable price for either way, people wouldn't be doing it on their own, but they were basically butchering up their own machine to keep it. And so I remember hearing a story of one guy and he just came back to Commodore the next day and said, I'm never going back there again. Because I guess the user group people knew too much and they knew how to really, put them sort of on the spot and say, why are you doing that?
Commodore would not be in the position it is. The first personal computer company to reach $1 billion in sales in 1 calendar year, the first company to sell 1 million computers of any kind, the first to sell 1 million modems, and we jump-started the home computer revolution. And there's no question about that. And we could not have done any of that without user group support from Canada, the UK, Italy, South America, Australia, many countries supported us, especially the UK and Canada.
Michael, I have a question. What's happening around 87-ish? You look at a lot of the computer magazines and it shows Intel coming over the horizon, the event horizon. There's specific magazine covers where Intel is gaining. Did you see this coming?
Okay. I adopted Jack's mantra. After 1984, I focused on the future. I stopped tracking. In 1984 and 1985, I gave a series of speeches, paid speeches by Byte Magazine, Comdex. I was hired as like a freelance speaker, and I just did it as a labor of love, but I was well compensated. I wrote my book. But after that, I put it all behind me. I mean, I don't dwell on the past. I live in the future. I honestly do. In 1985, I wasn't even looking at the computer industry. I was doing other industries and helping to start looking at things like classroom networks. The company where I was chief operating officer, Better Education, we had the seminal gateway patent for any kind of classroom network. And IBM had to borrow it from us. I negotiated a deal with Hewlett Packard to put intelligence into their calculators so they could be networked and used with our classroom network, which was called ClassTalk. And years later, I made a lot of money from that because when the company went out of business, on the way out, the founder sued all the companies that were using our patents illegally. And I think I got a check for $112,000 one year. But that's what I was doing. And then I went into gene therapy and I was helping advise biotech companies to launch gene therapy. And then I went into nanotech. 1 year after I wrote my book on nanotechnology, I was on the National Nanotechnology Initiative, which is $1 billion annual initiative, they have a triennial review committee, which basically invites 12 industry experts to come in and review the nanotechnology initiative and make suggestions for improvements and make sure everything's kosher. And I was on that for a year in 2016. I did that for a year, which was very prestigious. So I've been involved in lots of seminal technologies after Commodore, but I just basically lived in the future, and my whole thing is making the future happen faster, not going back and reinventing the personal computer.
Would you ever consider getting on BBSs ever again? I have to ask because there's quite a few people in the BBS community that unfortunately they live in other parts of the world where they can't get on right now. They can't be part of this, who would love to see you maybe blog or post in some of the online messaging that occurs on BBSs.
I don't have a lot of bandwidth. In fact, I've been turning down all invitations to speak or do podcasts, and I just could not resist Sweden, Italy, and Canada. And that's how I described the three that I accepted all in 1 month. I can't believe I did that. I don't even have the bandwidth for this normally, but I couldn't resist. I mean, I have a lot of friends and quote, 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 fans. So what I'm hoping is that these podcasts will be recorded and circulated so that people who could not be here or couldn't connect can see them later on YouTube or wherever. And also it's important, this is my way of preserving history. You can preserve history in a book, but as you can see, my book's out of print. Some of it's a little bit outdated. It's a lot more fun to listen to me tell funny stories than read a book.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of us BBS folks are doing is preserving that, because that was like a piece of history. Like before the internet was cool, there was nerds like probably quite a few of us on here that were connecting to each other's computers and sharing technology and software and programming together and building that community. And that's one of the things that it still exists. People still have it. There's still quite a few. I get that you don't have a lot of time, but it's not quite like making a blog or anything.
No,
Even
it's
if you
not,
just
it's not a question
read.
of time. It's not a question of time. I call it bandwidth. My brain right now is so occupied with multitasking. Our company does 20 things at the same time, and we keep all the balls in the air and we keep them compartmentalized in our minds and we keep them straight. We do 20-column spreadsheets in a Zoom meeting while we're Zooming. We might have people from 6 different countries in one Zoom meeting because Zoom and WhatsApp and those things allow us to tap the very best talent wherever it is in the world. Bangladesh, India, East Asia, Singapore, Italy, wherever the best talent is, we can tap it now. And not everybody hasn't realized that yet. But however, my bandwidth, keeping all this organized, and now I'm selling the house, which means packing. I have to buy new furniture for an apartment. All that stuff is just soaking up so much bandwidth. I just don't have time to do anything like this. And I made time because, tell you the truth, because the organizers of these events are kind of in my circle. And my philosophy is, if you're inside my circle, you have anything I can give you. And that's why I'm here tonight. You
Thank
guys
you
are
so
all,
much.
you guys
Michael,
are all
I
awesome.
know, thank you. We are winding down. I know it's getting late. If anybody doesn't have any other questions, I'll end with one. Can I ask?
I have one more after you.
Please. No, go ahead.
Oh,
Go
okay,
ahead.
just up in Canada, we did have a fellow.
David, no, I'm not going to grow my beard as long as yours.
No.
That's, I will not do it.
Neither, it was not planned. Anyway, we had a fellow, who
He's still
would
looking for
come
the
to
scissors.
meetings,
He's looking for the scissors.
and his name was Paul Higginbottom, and he was called the Vic Man when the Vic came out. And he was, I guess, the Commodore Canada guy. Did you know him?
I knew Paul. He was one of the Wonderkins. He was one of the geniuses. Yes, Paul is
Do you know
very
what became of
influential.
him?
I have no idea. I didn't track anybody.
Yeah,
Now, I stayed in touch with several of the Vic Commandos. I know Neil Harris and Jeff Bruette and Andy Finkel. I mean, we kind of look at each other on Facebook and we're connected that way, but we don't socialize. And so the Vic Commandos, a few of them that were close to me, but I didn't keep in touch with almost anybody at Commodore. I moved on. I really moved on.
Hey,
Oh,
Michael.
I should mention Kit Spencer was one of my best friends at Commodore. He remained a really good friend after Commodore. I consider him a good friend today. We don't talk that much, but we are still friends. We're kind of like lifelong friends from the Commodore era. And Kit Spencer is one of my favorite people in the world, one of the smartest guys I ever met, one of the most charming, generous, wonderful people. I can say Kit Spencer was probably my favorite person at Commodore, bar none. I just loved working with. I worked for him for about 6 months at one point, and we socialized a bit after I left Commodore. He lives in the Bahamas. He was one of the stars of the company, and I want to make sure to acknowledge Kit Spencer.
I would
Michael.
have a question if I can say something.
Stefan, hi, Stefan.
Yes, hello. I'm glad to meet you. Nice to be here. I have a question, and it's a three-part question. And I want to ask about Irving Gould. It's a bit a mysterious person, and it's not much known about him. And was it like a certainty that those two people, Irving Gould and Jack Trammell, sometime have to clash? Sometime is there? They have to get into this, break up, let's say it that way.
Okay.
And the second part, one moment, the second part is, what do you think? What can you today apply? What you learned from Jack Trammell? What is it today in today's world, or what things of Jack Trammell do you still use, or what can you not use today that is maybe not? I don't know, like, what I mean. I hope you get it. What I mean.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the first question is, I explained what happened in my book. I urge you to find my book. It's probably free online bootleg somewhere, and read the part about Irving and Jack and what happened. That explains it. There were some things that Jack did which drove Texas Instruments out of the market, but it then created a weak financial quarter for us, and that influenced Irving. Jack wanted to bring his 3 sons into the company as vice presidents, and Irving resisted that. And there were some other things, and then he had these gray-haired old guys whispering in his ear that they could do a better job and turn Commodore into IBM, which was stupid. So that's what happened. Now, in terms of what did I learn from Jack, I had $1 million worth of stock options. And when Jack left the company, and they weren't registered yet, and by the time they were registered, they were absolutely worthless. So I lost $1 million when Jack left the company. However, I wouldn't trade the $1 million for the lessons I learned, because since then, everything I've done in my life has benefited from the lessons I learned from Jack. I'm a very easygoing, friendly, outgoing, casual, rule-breaking maverick. But when I have to be tough, man, I can be as tough as any businessman out there. I can see problems before they occur, and that's what Jack could do. I draw on the fact that he created a family, and that was his culture of innovation. And when we are doing our culture of innovation at our company is called FinTech Ecosystem Development Corp. It's listed on NASDAQ FEXD. And our company is run like a business family. We are multicultural, multi-faith. multi-religion. We all embrace each other and treat each other like a family. And I don't think that comes directly from Jack, but it's certainly a philosophy that I inherited from him, along with many other things. Also, we treat every penny like your own. You don't waste money. And you do things at the speed of light. Why wait a week for something to happen when you can do it today? So those kinds of lessons are benefiting me big time in my current activities. And I would not trade $1 million for all those lessons because they're worth their weight in gold.
Michael, we don't have a lot of time left with you. You are given a lot of credit for what you did with the VIC-20, but what we know from documentation that you provided to me is you had a presence with the Commodore Max. Can you talk to us really quickly about your involvement with the Max machine? What happened there? How were you involved? We know it ended with Bill Wade, but what was your involvement?
Well, I wanted to have, I was pushing for a computer that had, was actually the +4 is what I really wanted. A computer that had software built in. I mean, why did you have to buy and load software? Why couldn't you just buy a computer that had word processing, spreadsheet, graphics, and database built in? Those were the 4 killer apps at the time. So I was pushing to have those built in. Of course, you have to have corrections and upgrades. Those could be done in a dongle. You know, a dongle is a plug-in, a little plug-in thing, like a USB port. So we could do upgrades on a dongle. So that was my concept, and that's what I was pushing for. And that's kind of a little bit where the Max came from and the Ultra Max. And that there was a personal computer with built-in software. And that was what I wanted, what I thought was the next thing to have. So I contribute. By the way, my expertise, I was consulted on a lot of things, and I provided a lot of memos. You can see the documentation, some of my ideas, some of my involvement. You know, I was one of the creative thinkers, so people drew on my expertise in many areas. But I don't take credit. I don't take credit for anything. I didn't drive anything after the VIC-20 per se. I contributed.
Prototype to Rob Clark. I'll never forgive you for that, but that's okay.
Should have bid higher.
No, I know it should have been me, but you sold it to Rob Clark. But
no comment.
Michael, if I may ask the last question.
Please.
You keep talking about the future. As I said, it's hard for a lot, myself included, hard for some of us to move into the future because we're so focused on the past. I still have my VIC-20, my original VIC-20. It's very special to me. What is the future? And is all of this talk about the metaverse, do you see this as the future? Since we've gone, no.
I believe that we just came through a 20-year period when everything was digitalized. Ubiquitous communication was implemented. Global connectivity became a reality. And now we're starting to apply those. So we are now in a radical application era. We are now turning banking into neo-banking. We are turning money and fiat money into digital currency. We are trying to figure out where social media fits. The metaverse, trying to come, I mean, why should I have an avatar on the board like this when I can already see all of your faces? I see all of your faces here, like the Brady Bunch. Why do you have to be avatars in some metaverse? I want to see the value proposition of the metaverse. Now, we are experimenting in my partner group with metaverse apps and ideas, but we haven't clarified our thinking on metaverse yet. I don't think metaverse is fully formed enough. But I think what we're doing now is we're applying and taking to the next level digitalization. I mean, it was enough to say, oh my God, we have digital music now. Oh my God, hey, I don't buy records anymore. Do you know how I play music? I go on YouTube. There's like 25 or 50 chill mixes on YouTube. I put on the chill mixes in a playlist order that I like. I put them on, I turn on my computer and I go about my work, whatever I'm doing, packing my house or whatever, and I have music playing. It doesn't cost me anything. What's the value proposition there? Ads? The ads that come on at the beginning of the YouTube? I don't know, but we're really seeing a huge transformation where we're getting the benefits of everything being digital. And I don't think we quite worked all that out yet, but we're getting there. It's really exciting. There's so much yet to be done.
But what is the future beyond the iPhone? Since we're beyond the home computer and people don't need computers anymore, it's in their pocket, but what's the next thing? Is it, Google Glass failed? Do you see anything in the future?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I use my Samsung Galaxy 10, which is getting a little bit dated, as my laptop more than anything. I use that as my laptop. I do everything. I write articles. I communicate. I check stock prices. I read the news. Sometimes I get music. Sometimes I bring up some music and just put it in a little holder and I play music on my cell phone. I mean, my smartphone is so smart. I love that device. It's like the best device ever. I'm on my laptop now. I have a Surface laptop. I would never go back to a bigger computer. I don't know what the next computer is going to be. I have no idea.
Michael, thank you so much for your time out. We know you're a busy man. It's an honor. And I can't believe we made this happen. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. I'm delighted. You are all in my circle. And I count you all as friends now. Anyone who whether I've met you or not, consider yourself in my circle now and in my network. And I'm so delighted to have the opportunity to talk with you tonight and answer your questions.
Next time we see you, we'll bring you 2 beers.
4.
4, okay.
Deal.
God bless you all, and good luck in all of your endeavors. God bless you all, and God bless and wish you all well in your endeavors. I hope you're all successful in whatever you're trying to do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
God
you,
bless.
Michael.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Michael.
Good night.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not a part of TPUG, please consider joining. We will be having World of Commodore in December. Check tpug.ca for details. More will be released as we get closer to the date. Through tpug.ca, you can find our Discord server, and you are most welcome to join us for chats or the Toronto CBM mailing list. Again, feel free to join. Those are free for anybody to join in.
Thank you to all who attended.
Good night.
Good night.